Hi, I'm Ryan Malone, Music Director at Herbert W. Armstrong College and Imperial Academy, based here in Edmond, Oklahoma, at the Philadelphia Church of God World Headquarters. Welcome back to the third lesson of our conducting tutorials. Again, these are based on a symposium we conducted back in 2004, and which was based on one I had attended a few years prior to that. They condensed the years of instruction I received from my choral conducting teacher, Dr. David Rail, into a single day, and I'm repackaging that material into an even more concise format such as this. And for these initial lessons, today's included, I'm expanding the discussion to cover principles of any kind of conducting, not just choral ensembles. So we have covered the basic principles involved in starting and stopping the sound, whether this happens on the downbeat or whatever beat where it happens. We have talked about how to do this even when the sound starts or stops between beats, on what we sometimes call the half beats. We've talked about cueing a number of these situations after the music has already started and is continuously going. Today we are talking about moments where the beat stops. I don't mean the sound stops, but the beat gets interrupted either by a fermata or a hold, the top symbol there, when a beat is sustained longer than usual, or by a pause, usually indicated by the two lines which the Italians call a CESURA, which is right there. First off, even though fermata means hold, I don't like using the word hold as pertains to holding a note. I prefer sustain the note. Hold could imply choking it off, whereas sustain suggests the idea of supplying constant energy to the sound. Or sometimes I'll say it's continuously creating the sound, which is pretty much possible on any instrument except one where the note is struck and then begins to decay, as on the piano, harp, or some percussion instruments. Okay, so when you see a fermata in the music, you basically have three choices of how to handle these. One is keep the sound going through the fermata into the following note without any break whatsoever. Two, completely break after the fermata and then restart the sound again. Three, stop the sound after the fermata, but use that release as the preparation beat for restarting the sound. Which one you should do would be based on an informed decision after studying the score. And you can obviously tell the ensemble how you will do the fermata in the rehearsal. Let's say our ensemble is performing hymn number 2 from the Philadelphia Church of God's Bible hymnal, Why Do the Nations Make Plans in Vain, by Dwight Armstrong. There's a fermata in the final line. On the first verse, the text after the fermata is clearly a continuation of the same sentence. He speaks to them in his great wrath from his most holy sovereign throne. So I might opt to do that the first way because of the text. The second verse contains two separate statements. You shall be king of all the earth. You shall rule with a rod of iron. So that might make sense to completely break, to stop and restart. And again, this is if you're conducting this with a choral ensemble. I'm not suggesting this is how we would do it for song services with a congregation. This is purely for hypothetical teaching purposes. The third verse has two statements where the second is an answer to the first. Rulers of earth, take warning now, place your trust in the one true God. So I might break, but use the break to immediately prep for the sound restarting. So each one of those verses gives an option for how to do each version of the fermata. So here's what I mean with all of those, going back to verse 1 and doing the first way to handle fermatas, and that is carrying the sound through. In every case, a fermata means we need to think of the beat in two parts. The part that is sustained and the part where we prep them to move on. So in the example we're using here, the fermata is on beat 3. I have to stop on th in my beat pattern. 1, 2, th, right? And then complete the beat when I'm prepping them to move on to beat 4. Okay? So like this. Here's the first verse. So it would go like this. He speaks to them in his great wrath from his his most holy sovereign throne. And watch that again. And notice how I stop at th in the beat 3, or the ictus of 3, and then I keep going to prep on how to move on. Here we go. He speaks to them in his great wrath from his most holy sovereign throne. Now notice I don't just stop my hand completely on the first part of beat 3, his great wrath. I don't just stop. That might encourage an undesirable sound either in technique or phrasing. When I get to that ictus, I let my hand move slowly through the sustain so they know that the sound isn't stopping. And then I speed up the gesture when I tend it to prep for beat 4. Okay? He speaks to them in his great wrath from his most holy sovereign throne. The second way to do a fermata, which in our case here lines up with the second verse of this strophic hymn, is where we release the sound and completely stop time in essence. Here's what that would sound like on the second verse. You shall be king of all the earth. You shall rule with a rod of iron. So I still stop at 1, 2, th, with a little motion to show that the sound is being held. Then I use my left hand to release the sound, or sometimes it's called a cutoff. Then I stay still to indicate that the beat has completely stopped. Then I show the prep beat of 3 to bring the ensemble back in on beat 4. Watch that one more time. You shall be king of all the earth. You shall rule with a rod of iron. Now the third way to do a fermata is the one I find the easiest because it allows you to combine the release and the preparation beat into one motion. This also means that when we release, we have to breathe on that release, thus making it look like a prep. Let's see that here with verse 3. Rulers of earth, take warning now. Place your trust in the one true God. So notice when my left hand comes up to prep for the release, my right hand has stopped on through, and then when I release, I breathe and show the rest of 3 so they can sing on 4. Here it is again. Rulers of earth, take warning now. Place your trust in the one true God. So those are the 3 ways to handle a fermata. Whichever way you do it, I just remind you that the initial part of the fermata beat needs a little motion so that the visual doesn't imply that the sound should stop. We want to demonstrate how they are creating the music. I shouldn't need to spend too much time on the CESURA because it shares many of the similarities between the second and third ways we treat fermatas. Commonly, a CESURA will occur after a fermata, which means your fermata only has options 2 and 3 as ways that that fermata can be handled. But in any respect, a CESURA means there should be a pause in the sound. The music stops, and you basically will ask yourself, how long is this pause? If it's a complete stop, then you'd handle it like the second way we talked about fermatas. If it's a pause that's basically the length of a prep beat, then handle it the third way we talked about fermatas. Sometimes the notation will indicate a different symbol to act the same way a CESURA would, perhaps a fermata with a breath mark, or perhaps a double bar line in the middle of a measure, as in many Renaissance or Baroque chorales. That's all I'll say on that, and you can refer back to the fermata section to see how to handle any pauses like that. If the score requires you to change tempo, there are some things to keep in mind regarding this. If an accelerando or tempo increase is required, you might think, well, I just conduct faster. And you'd be right. But just to state for the record and to analyze what is actually happening, you are moving from one ictus to another more quickly. In some cases, the beat itself could get smaller. So if I'm conducting this way, my beat's a certain size. And if I make the beat smaller, I go faster. The same works in reverse if there's a ritardando. Getting to each ictus more slowly will tell them you need things to slow down. Also, making the beat itself a little larger will indicate this. So if I'm going along like this, then I make it a little bit bigger, it gets slower. Sometimes the ritardando is molto, or much, and there are much smaller notes in between the beats that must be conducted, and a long flowing slow gesture won't give them enough information. This is where we as conductors have to subdivide the beat for them. For instance, in 4/4 time, we're conducting quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I subdivide my gestures into eighth notes, then I have this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Knowing how to subdivide the gesture helps when the music slows down so much that it would be hard for the ensemble to know where to perform all the smaller notes inside the beat. The slower something gets, the more we need to show them how the time is divided up. So for instance, at the end of But Thanks Be to God in Handel's Messiah, there is a slowed down final section. In the penultimate bar, nearly everyone is sustaining long notes like this. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, or 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And slowing that down isn't that hard to just make the beat larger. But the altos have to sing 2 eighth notes in that penultimate bar on beat 4. They do this. Through our Lord Jesus Christ. Or 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. And if I just show them a slow beat 4, I will get varying interpretations of how they should sing those 2 slow eighth notes over my 1 slow gesture. So what I do is I subdivide beat 4 only, like this. Through our Lord Jesus Christ. So in that case, I subdivide the last beat of the bar. In some cases, I might need to subdivide beats 3 and 4. In that example, I only need to subdivide beat 4. And I realize that looks kind of like the motion we used to have the ensemble release the sound on a half a beat, sort of that check mark look. So that's how to handle a significant slowing of the tempo. And today we've covered that, other tempo changes, plus how to sustain or stop the beat in the case of fermatas or cesuras. A lot of the decisions we make come from our study of the score. And that's what we will address next time, another conducting principle that applies to both choral and instrumental conductors. And I hope you can join me for that.